She said, "No one wants me." A single father's surprising response will leave you amazed. David tightened his grip on the wrench, the cool metal biting into his palm as he wrestled the stubborn bolt of the old Chevy engine. It was one of those damp evenings in Maplewood, where the air felt thick and the world outside turned gray under the weight of the autumn clouds. Just a few steps away from the grease-stained tools that had become his lifeline, the muffled cries from down the hall pierced through the rhythmic clank and hiss of his workspace. Each sob was a reminder of the weight on his shoulders, the echoes of a daughter's pain unraveling his every attempt to hold things together. "No one wants me," Lily had said, her heart break like a drumbeat in his ears, reverberating through his chest. He felt his stomach drop. The confession tore deep into his soul, sending waves of panic crashing over him. He was a mechanic. He fixed engines, not hearts. He didn't know how to mend the fractures all around him, much less the ones within his own child. What if his efforts to protect her had only cast a darker shadow on her spirit? He caught his breath, squeezing his eyes shut at the image of her longing face, wanting nothing more than to wrap her up in his love and shield her from despair. But the tools in his hands felt heavier now, as if they were the very burdens he tried to lift every day. He stood at Lily's door, hesitating as anxiety knit together with determination. The rhythm of his heart quickened, each beat reminding him of the distance between them. It wasn't just the mechanics of fixing cars, it was the mechanics of fatherhood, of being enough when every moment felt rife with inadequacy. "What do I say?" he whispered to himself, a question that held within it his deepest fear, that he was not enough. He rapped softly at the door, breath hitching as he waited for a response. "Go away," she murmured, a ghost of fight in her tone that shattered him further. David pushed the door open, the creak resonating the dread in his mind. There she lay, a bundle of sorrow amidst rumpled sheets, her eyes streaming with tears as if they carried the weight of the world. Lily. He trailed off, unsure of how to articulate the chaos in his mind. He wanted to empathize, to reach out and pull her from the depths, but he felt overwhelmed. Every ounce of his being wanted to tell her she was wanted, loved, and cherished. Instead, he felt paralyzed. Faced with the gulf of her suffering, he was speechless. "I feel invisible." Her words shattered the air between them. Caught in the suffocating grip of duty and despair, David's insides knotted. How could he convince her otherwise, when he felt so helpless in the face of his own grief? Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. David remembered the lessons from his own father and the perseverance that ran through the family like an old engine. Could he nurture that spirit in her? A determination sparked. He opened his mouth to speak, the words thick and heavy, full of hope as much as fear. "We can do something together, something that could help you find your voice." But even as he said it, doubt cast its shadow. Would she see his efforts as a lifeline or another failed promise in a life full of them? Courage surged through him as he thought about all the times he had rallied from his own despair. Nervously, he suggested a community art class. It sounded absurd coming from him, a man whose world revolved around the smell of oil and the rumble of engines, but he needed her to see that expression could break the silence that smothered them. Art? She shifted, skepticism etched on her face. "Why would I do that?" "Why not? Sometimes trying something new helps us chase the darkness away," he replied, willing his voice to steady. But anxiety fluttered beneath his skin as he imagined stepping into the world of paint and canvas, feeling the fresh judgment of strangers. Lily's brow furrowed and, For a moment, he feared he'd struck a false chord. Yet somewhere deep in her hazel eyes, there flickered a spark, a glimmer of curiosity fighting through the weight of her anguish. But just as hope began to inch in, it was shadowed by an impending storm. His heart sank as he recalled all those unspoken worries that plagued their lives, school pressures, friendships that felt always just out of reach, and now this art showcase looming, threatening to crush her newfound enthusiasm. Doubt settled, heavy like bricks stacked high on his chest. Would he be enough to lift her? As Lily seemed lost in thought, a heavy silence fell, knitting the tension tighter, their spirits still awash in uncertainty. He knelt beside her, searching for the right words that could bridge the divide, wanting nothing more than to breathe life anew into the fragile bond they shared. Just as he felt the tide turning, a sudden knock startled them both, freezing their moment and propelling them toward an unknown next chapter of their lives. David's heart raced at the sudden knock, a blend of trepidation and anticipation flooding his thoughts. The sound reverberated through the tension hanging in the air, interrupting the silence that had become both a comfort and a curse. As he turned to look at Lily, her gaze mirrored his unease. Together they dived deeper into the uncertainty that enveloped them. "Who?" she started, her voice trailing as David stood and crossed the room. His mind flashed through the possibilities, from well-meaning neighbors to oblivious school officials. Yet the most troubling speculation was the thought of something darker lurking just outside their door, waiting to exploit their vulnerability. Gripping the doorknob, David paused, his hand trembling slightly. It was a moment that felt suspended in time, heavy laden with fear of the unknown. What if they weren't ready for whatever lay beyond the threshold? What if an unwelcomed visitor crushed the fragile glimmer of hope he saw in Lily's eyes? In a quick inhale, he pulled the door open. Standing in the dim light was Mrs. Jensen, an elderly neighbor known for her kindness, but also her unyielding sense of curiosity. Her smile was warm, but laden with concern. "I thought I'd check in on you two," she said softly, her eyes flicking past him to rest on Lily's tear-streaked face. "Everything's fine, Mrs. Jensen," David replied hastily, not wanting to dive into their turmoil in full view of another. But the way her brow furrowed indicated she sensed more than he let on. Lily, clearly not ready for a visitor, shrank back behind David, a frown dimming her features. "It's not fine," she murmured, her raw honesty cutting through the air, leaving vulnerability stark between them all. Mrs. Jensen's expression softened, sensing the burden they were under. "It's okay to talk about it, dear. You know I'm always here if you need someone to listen." David felt the familiar knot of helplessness tighten in his stomach. It was one thing to hide behind walls. It was another to allow others in, especially as the vulnerabilities of fatherhood felt so stark at this moment. Using the weight of a father's instinct, he stepped back and pulled Lily forward slightly. "We were just thinking of trying something new," he said, trying to redirect the conversation. "An art class, actually." Mrs. Jensen's eyes brightened at his suggestion. What a wonderful idea. Art can be such a profound way to express oneself. A flicker of interest danced across Lily's face, momentarily evading the shadows that enveloped her. Yet her skepticism quickly returned. "But what if I'm not good at it?" David recalled his own struggles with failure, the echo of his past creeping in. "That doesn't matter," he said with more confidence than he felt. "It's not about being good. It's about trying. Remember when I first started fixing cars? I was terrible. But I kept going, and eventually, I found my way." The memory of rusted parts and the scent of oil lingered as a testament to his own journey. Maybe, just maybe, this was what Lily needed to hear. Growth came from persistence, not perfection. But what if it doesn't help? Lily's voice wavered, revealing her deeper trepidations. What if it didn't help? The vulnerability of that question clawed at David's insides. He didn't have all the answers. The truth was painted in shades of doubt, tangled with shadows of parental inadequacy. But here was the crux of it. If they didn't try, they'd be bound to the same cycle of despair. "I can't promise it will solve everything," he admitted, his voice steadier now. "But I can promise that I'm here for you, no matter what." As their eyes met, something shifted in the air, a connection forming once more amidst the chaos. And within that moment, David sensed a flicker of resolve igniting in Lily. But just as he felt renewed hope rise between them, Mrs. Jensen spoke up. "You know, I used to teach art classes at the local community center. It's been too long, really. I'd be happy to help guide you both." Lily looked at David, uncertainty still etched on her brow. But something in her expression hinted at the growing desire to challenge her doubts. The offer hung in the air, a lifeline dangling just out of reach. David gripped the doorframe tighter, a decision weighing on him. Should they accept Mrs. Jensen's help and open their world further? As the silence stretched, he realized this was a crossroads. The decision they made now could solidify the understanding that they were not alone. But fear loomed. What if opening up exposed them to more pain? With his mind racing and heart pounding, David knew he had to break the cycle. If not for himself, then for Lily. Deep inside, he felt an urgent whisper reminding him that confronting these fears was the only way toward healing. "Okay, let's do it," he finally said, his voice a mixture of resolve and apprehension. "We'll try art together." As Mrs. Jensen's smile widened and Lily's brow relaxed ever so slightly, the world outside continued to darken. What lay ahead promised challenges and revelations, but this was only the beginning. Little did David realize how profound this choice would ripple into their lives, unearthing hidden talents, confronting fears, and reshaping their connection in ways he never imagined. But as the thought settled in, another knock echoed through the air, a sound that could either shatter their newfound resolve or solidify it. With bated breath, David turned to the door, both eager and fearful for what awaited them next. David's heart raced again at the echoing knock, adding a layer of tension to the fragile peace they had just begun to build. He exchanged a glance with Lily, whose uncertainty had morphed into a mixture of curiosity and apprehension. The air felt charged, almost electric, as if whatever lay beyond that door was capable of shifting their realities once more. "Do you want me to get that?" Lily asked quietly, barely concealing her nervousness. "No, I'll handle it," David replied, reminding himself to maintain the authenticity of his role as protector. As he opened the door, he prepared himself for yet another encounter that could shatter their moment of promise. This time, it wasn't a familiar face, but a young girl around Lily's age, eyes wide and timid, standing shivering in the cool evening air. Hi," she stammered, a hint of insecurity infusing her voice. "I'm Chloe. I just moved in next door." David found himself searching her expression, looking for cracks in the facade, wondering if this unexpected visit might bring the comfort of a new friendship or serve as yet another source of distress for Lily. "Hey there," he said, trying to project warmth. "How can we help you?" Chloe shifted nervously from one foot to the other, her gaze dipping as if seeking comfort in the ground beneath her. "I saw you guys through the window. Doing art? I love to draw." David felt a flicker of something. Could this be a pivotal moment? "That's great. We actually just started an art project. Why don't you join us?" Lily's eyes widened with disbelief, a flicker of protest dancing across her features. "Dad," she began, the protest dying on her lips. "Lily, just think of it as a way to have fun," he insisted, trying to mask his own unease and hoping to infuse some enthusiasm into the uncertain atmosphere. "Sure, I'd love that," Chloe exclaimed, her self-doubt lifting even if only slightly. As Chloe joined them at the kitchen table, a A peculiar sensation settled into David's consciousness. He found himself sculpting the evening with brushes and colors, guiding both girls while the first strokes transformed the emptiness of the page into vivid scenes. But beneath the excitement, he also felt the looming specter of self-doubt creeping in, that he was leading them into uncharted territories of vulnerability. "Do you think I could ever be really good at art?" Lily asked, her voice now a whisper. David remembered his past failures and the weight of his words. He took a deep breath, trying to balance honesty with encouragement. "Improvement takes practice. But I do believe you have an eye for creativity, just like your mother," he said, unsure if he was opening hidden wounds or igniting confident flames. As brushes danced across canvases, magical moments began to unfurl. Stories emerged from timid strokes. Hands shook at first, but soon gained confidence with every splash of color. David noticed Lily's initial hesitance transformed into sheer joy as she shared a laugh with Chloe. The creative process unearthing layers of connection he feared were lost. Yet, amidst the laughter and colors, David caught himself spiraling into thoughts of the future. Would this newfound energy bleed into their daily lives? Would it help them navigate the hardships ahead? The responsibility of his past, his failures, loomed just outside the frame of their art. With the thrill of creating under the flickering kitchen lights, the camaraderie blossoming between the kids could not completely dispel his lingering worry. He noticed how easily they opened up to each other, while he, even in this moment of connection, remained tethered to a darker past. As David turned his focus back to painting, his brush suddenly faltered. The last brushstroke felt out of place, disconnected. A swell of frustration surged within him. He had fought against his demons only to see them resurface. What had he truly achieved by merely arranging a distraction? The looming fears from his past whispered louder now. He was confronted with a choice: either confront those demons, or allow them to overshadow their shared joys. Lost in thought, his hand trembled with the weight of realization. It didn't matter how he once had failed. It was what he made of those experiences now that defined him. As the sun began to set, casting a warm glow across their creations, the door opened once more. This time, however, what stepped through seemed to magnify David's fear. A harsh voice broke the newfound silence. "I need to talk to you, David," came a familiar tone that sent shivers down his spine. Just as the moment of discovery and growth felt within reach, reality collided with potential catastrophe. David's heart sank. The night held promises, but now it bristled with shadows, ready to unravel his efforts. Would he stay committed to the path of healing he had just begun to tread? David's breath caught in his throat, the voice slicing through the warmth of the moment like an icy blade. He turned slowly, his mind racing with potential confrontations and past failures, the sweetness of creativity now overshadowed by the impending storm. "Who is it?" Chloe asked, sensing the shift in energy. "Just someone I need to speak with," he replied, keeping his tone even. But inside, his stomach churned. It was the voice of his ex-wife, Sarah, one that evoked memories of chaos wrapped in a painful silence. As David stood at the threshold of confrontation, Lily's tentative expression mirrored his own inner turmoil. She glanced from him to the doorway, anxiety radiating. "Is everything okay?" she whispered. He offered a careful smile, a mask for his unease. "Yeah, it'll be fine," he reassured her, though he wasn't sure if he believed his own words. David's heart hammered as he stepped into the living room, forcing a deep breath before launching into that space between confrontation and resolution. There stood Sarah, her arms crossed defensively, uncertainty flickering in her eyes. "David," she started, the tension evident. "We need to discuss Lily." "Right now?" he asked, struggling to remain calm. The dark cloud of their past loomed ominously between them, swirling with unspoken grievances and complex emotions. Yes, right now, she insisted, her tone firm but brittle. This can't wait. Resisting the urge to retreat behind anger, David clenched his fists, forcing himself to listen. What's urgent enough that it can't wait? He asked, an edge creeping into his voice. Lily's having a hard time adapting. I know that she's been spending more time with you. But I don't want her to develop unrealistic expectations. The words tumbled out, punctuated by the tension that hung heavily in the air. You can't keep playing house with her. The accusation cut deeper than any knife. David clenched his jaw, ready to argue, but the more logical part of his mind, the one that had helped him evolve through personal trials, began to surface. Was it true? Was he merely providing a false sense of security? Could the time spent with Lily be setting her up for disappointment? Sarah, I'm not trying to undermine you. We're just trying to find our footing together. His voice was steadier than he felt, but beneath, a flicker of doubt ignited, sending ripples of self-questioning through him. You think this is good for her? She fired back, her gaze piercing. What happens when you inevitably disappoint her? She'll feel abandoned all over again. That struck a chord. David felt the crack in his armor widen. Her words reflected the shadow of his failure, one he brushed under the rug in front of Lily, but couldn't escape in this moment. All the changes he attempted to instill in his life. Was he really up to the task? No one is perfect, Sarah, he replied, his voice softer now, fighting against the rising tide of defensiveness. But I'm trying to be better for her. For me. Every moment with Lily matters, and I won't let her feel alone in this. Silence followed, stretching thick with unspoken truths. He met her gaze, searching for something in her eyes. A flicker of understanding. A fragment of the person he once loved, who had walked alongside him before life twisted their paths apart. Rather than finding comfort, he saw the reflection of her own uncertainties mirrored in him. We can't be our past, he said, a plea disguised as a declaration. If we want Lily to thrive, we have to support each other, not fight over her. It's not fair. The moment of hesitation hung between them. Could they indeed break free from their stormy history, or were they both too weighted by mistrust and regret? A voice interrupted his spiraling thoughts. Chloe poked her head in from the kitchen, innocence shining through her eyes. Are you guys okay? Her small presence punctured the tension, momentarily distracting David from the heavy conversation. He glanced at Lily, catching her gaze filled with apprehension. With heart still racing, David felt renewed determination rise within him. He might not have all the answers, but he knew that he had to protect Lily, to forge ahead even amidst the uncertainty, to truly understand what was required of him. Why don't we talk about this rather than letting it simmer? He interjected. Let's be honest about what we need for Lily's sake. As Sarah paused, considering, David found something in him awakening, a determination to confront not only the mistakes of the past, but the potential for a united front in the future. But beneath that hope, shadows still loomed, desperate to undermine newfound resolve. And just then, the doorbell rang again. It shattered the fragile moment, bringing David back from his introspective thoughts. But he could not ignore the alarm bells ringing in his head. What waited beyond that door could change everything he was beginning to understand about love, healing, and the battle for their family. With uncertainty rising, he turned to Sarah, both of them gripping the railing of the unknown. Would stepping into another conversation lead him closer to the truth, or plunge him deeper into chaos? The answer waited on the other side, ready to test the strength of newfound resilience. David's heart raced as he moved toward the door, each measured step echoing the uncertainty that enveloped him. The doorbell rang again, that sound a cruel reminder of his precarious balancing act, straddling the past he hoped to escape, and the future he yearned to secure for Lily. He glanced back at Sarah, whose features reflected his own turmoil, and for a fleeting moment, he wondered if they were both trapped in the same vicious cycle. As he opened the door, the face before him was unexpected, a young woman with wide, earnest eyes and a shy smile. "Hi, I'm Rebecca. I hope I'm not interrupting." Her voice was sweet, almost hopeful, but David noticed the way her fingers fidgeted with the strap of her bag, a subtle hint of anxiety. "No, not at all," David replied, forcing a welcoming smile while casting a quick glance at Sarah, whose brows knitted together in confusion. "What can I help you with?" "I'm Lily's art teacher," Rebecca said, and the mention of Lily drew both parents' attention. "I wanted to talk about something important, about her progress in class." At that, David felt a small surge of relief. This was a professional visit, a constructive conversation, but the weight of Sarah's presence loomed large. Was it a good idea to have this discussion now, with unresolved tension hanging in the air? He needed clarity, not distraction. "Sure, come in," he gestured, stepping aside. As Rebecca entered, David felt the familiar pulse of his instincts, protective, defensive, curious. He ushered her toward the living room, where the atmosphere still crackled from the previous confrontation. Rebecca settled into one of the chairs, her gaze darting between David and Sarah. "I'm really proud of Lily," she began, her enthusiasm palpable. "She has a unique perspective in her artwork. It's refreshing. However, I think she's holding back." David caught Sarah's skeptical glance, but he chose to focus on Rebecca. "Holding back?" "Yes. She illustrates a world full of colors and emotions, yet there's a subtle shadow in her work. I've noticed it's as if she's afraid to express her full self," Rebecca explained, her voice steady. "I think it's crucial to encourage her to explore her feelings freely, especially given her situation." David felt a ripple of concern wash over him. Lily's emotions were a tapestry woven from strands of joy, confusion, and occasionally profound sorrow. It was a struggle they both had been navigating, but now, hearing this observation from someone outside their immediate orbit struck a different chord. "What do you suggest we do?" "I'd love to incorporate some activities that foster open expression, perhaps a family art project that allows her to see that sharing her thoughts and feelings is welcomed," Rebecca suggested with warmth. David glanced at Sarah, searching for agreement. A part of him wanted to dive into this new proposal, to seize on the hope that Lily could express her feelings freely and confidently. But he felt Sarah's cool apprehension. "That sounds great," he said cautiously. "Family involvement is key," Rebecca continued, warmth lingering in her tone. "I understand that this is a challenging time for her. The more she sees that expressing herself is celebrated, the more she can heal. You both have an undeniable role in this." David's mind whirled. Healing. That word echoed with emotional weight. Could they really be the support that Lily needed? He looked at Sarah, faint traces of doubt playing on her face. "I appreciate your input, Rebecca," Sarah finally said, her tone carefully measured. "But this isn't just about art. We need to address her emotional well-being comprehensively." David felt a rush of frustration, but held his tongue. The art project felt like a stepping stone, an entry point for deeper conversations they had to face, yet he could sense the walls Sarah erected, inching higher every moment. "Let's do it," he said, his voice sharper than intended, but holding a quiet resolve. "Lily needs consistency and care from both of us." Rebecca nodded, sensing the shift, and conducted the conversation toward logistical details. But as David listened, part of him remained on edge. The seeds of conflict, unease, and lingering questions had only been buried under the surface of this seemingly simple proposal. With the conversation winding down, Rebecca stood to leave as David felt the tension in the room settle once again, informing the dynamics that remained unresolved. "Thank you for your insight," he said quietly, locking eyes with Rebecca, allowing admiration to shine through. As she stepped out, David turned back to Sarah, the weight of the earlier confrontation lingering heavily in the air. "We need to work together for her," he stated firmly, determined to confront the silence they had both been carrying. "Can we really do that?" Sarah's voice was soft, uncertainty flickering in her eyes. The question hung between them, suspended in the tension that had defined their communication for too long. But beneath his determined resolve, David sensed that their struggles were far from over. The cracks in their foundation were widening, ready to swallow them whole again. He had to confront the truth that lay ahead, armed with the painful knowledge that healing often demanded the darkest exploration. And just as he stood contemplating, another thought struck him, a growing urgency. What would he need to confront in himself to truly foster the changes they all desperately required? With the shadows of doubt gathering at his edges, it became clear that soon the answers would not just be a matter of choice, but an unavoidable reckoning that would alter the course of their family's future. David stood there, the dust motes dancing in the afternoon light, the air thick with the unspoken words that threatened to burst forth. He felt a newfound determination swelling within him. This was his chance to reshape their future, to steer them away from the swamps of discontent and into the brightness of possibility. He needed to move beyond the feelings of helplessness that had anchored him for too long. "Sarah, I can't just sit here and wait for things to get better," he said, a fire igniting in his voice. "We both have to be willing to change, together." As he said the words, he felt the weight of it all, the old patterns urging him to retreat, to settle back into silence. Yet, somewhere deep inside, he recognized the ember of hope flickering, a desire to evolve, not just for Lily, but for themselves. For a moment, Sarah's expression softened, and he dared to hope that perhaps they could find a common ground, a middle path through the chaos. "What are you thinking?" she asked cautiously, as if testing the waters of this still fragile desire. "I think we should really commit to this art project," he said, searching her face for any trace of skepticism. "It's a way to break down the walls, to show Lily that her feelings matter, and that she isn't alone in them." Her brow furrowed, doubt still lurking behind her guarded expression. "And you believe a few sessions with paint and canvas will magically resolve everything?" "It's not just about painting. It's about opening the door to discussions we've been avoiding," he countered. "This could become a safe space for Lily to express everything she's trying to navigate, and if we're part of that process, we can rediscover how to communicate ourselves." He hadn't intended to push so hard, but the thought of Lily dimming under the weight of unexpressed emotions struck a nerve. Their daughter had been so strong, stable even, but she was still so young, too young to bear the weight of their discord alone. "What if it doesn't work?" Sarah asked, crossing her arms defensively. "What if it just brings everything to the surface, and we can't handle that?" "Then we face it. Together," David replied, feeling the adrenaline of fear mixed with determination. "We owe it to her, and to ourselves, to give it a real chance." Silence hung between them, and David wrestled with the beating of his own heart. The more he considered the complexity of their situation, the more he understood the depth of the work that lay ahead. This was not just about the art project. It was about holding himself accountable, confronting his own fears, and clearing the fog he had allowed to settle around their family. "I hate feeling like we're fighting against each other in front of her," he admitted, vulnerability breaking through his resolve. "We need to model what a healthy relationship looks like. If not for us, then for her." Sarah's eyes flickered with something, perhaps a glimmer of realization or a recognition of her own fears, but it was gone too quickly for David to decipher. "You really want to do this? You're prepared to face whatever comes next?" "More than anything," he affirmed, a burning conviction igniting inside him. She took a slow breath, pondering it all, as if weighing the implications of agreements made on uncertain ground. "Fine, let's try it. But I want to establish some boundaries. We both need to be clear on that." David nodded, a wave of relief washing over him. This was not the fiendish victory he had imagined, but a truce, a fragile step forward. It was enough. As they began to talk logistics and dates for the first family art project, David's thoughts danced ahead, envisioning moments of unguarded laughter, the release of emotional tension, and the subtle weaving of a stronger family fabric. Yet, his mind couldn't shake the underlying feeling that deeper issues lurked, waiting for confrontation. What uncharted territories of emotional vulnerability lay ahead, both for Lily and for the couple together? As the conversation turned logistical, he caught a moment of Sarah's gaze, a spark of something unwelcoming dancing just beneath the surface. The shadows of doubt could not disappear overnight. He could feel them lurking, hinting at the deeper truths they had yet to confront. And as David braced himself for the path that would lead them through their shared pain toward healing, he knew he would have to unearth his own buried fears, because this journey was only beginning, and the hardest battles were still to come. Would he be ready to unmask his deepest insecurities when the moment demanded it? As the sun sank lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the room, David found himself mulling over the logistics of the art project. It felt almost surreal to think of how splashing paint on canvas could become the vehicle for their family's healing. He could still sense the tension from earlier, a palpable reminder that their journey was about to traverse uncomfortable emotional terrain. Determined to keep the momentum, he decided to sketch out a plan. He gathered supplies from an old closet, paintbrushes, tubes of vibrant colors, and several blank canvases that had collected dust through the years. Each item he pulled out made him reflect on the life that had once been rich with creativity. Ideas began swirling. Would they set themes for each session? Would laughter intermingle with tears as colors collided? His thoughts shifted to Lily. What might she create? He envisioned her small, hesitant hand dipping a brush into a deep blue, a color that could only express the vast ocean of feelings she seemed to drown in. This could be their escape route from silence. He felt the flickering ember of hope reigniting, gentler now, tempered by realism and desire. "Dad, can we do the painting now?" Lily's innocent voice broke his reverie. She stood in the doorway, a picture of youthful eagerness, contrasting sharply with the burdensome weight he felt he carried. "Not just yet, sweetie. We have to wait for your mom," he replied, making sure to infuse his tone with comfort. The warmth that flooded back in her eyes was the fuel David needed. As Lily wandered back toward her room, he couldn't shake a feeling of urgency. He had spent too much of his life coasting, suppressing true conversation for the sake of avoidance. This time was different. His drive to cultivate emotional awareness ignited a spark of accountability. The art project had been the catalyst, but the depth of the issue would demand honesty and vigilance from him, personal traits he often buried under layers of self-doubt. When Sarah returned to the kitchen, he acted instinctively. "Why don't we set a theme for our first session?" he proposed, as if casting a line into uncertain waters, testing for interest. Something simple, like ways to say I love you. She raised an eyebrow, skepticism flaring momentarily. "Love sounds like a tall order, don't you think?" "It might," he admitted, his voice firm yet vulnerable. "But it's also a feeling we desperately need to express. If we can't do that, then we'll remain stuck where we are." Silence filled the kitchen again, heavy and rolling like fog across a lake. He could see the wheels turning in Sarah's mind. He could feel her parsing each of his words, examining their implications like precious stones. It was too easy to let this myriad of emotions turn into dismissal, but they needed to push past the hesitation that had tethered them for too long. "All right, let's try it." She finally relented, but her stance remained guarded. As they settled into a discussion about timelines and expectations, David felt the stakes rising. Trust was fragile as the canvases they were about to fill with color. They would have to confront not only their fears, but also their imperfections, flaws woven into the very fabric of their lives. It was a risk, yet it was a risk he was willing to take. But a lingering question gripped him. What if their shared attempt at vulnerability revealed more about their gaps than it did about their connection? He could already sense the vulnerability they would open themselves to. What if it pushed them further apart instead of pulling them together? As the first evening of the project approached, the anxiety stirred within him, transformed into determination. He was bolstered by the prospect of discovering how deeply he could connect during this emotional exploration. Yet he prepared himself mentally for the discomfort that surfaced when insecurities were laid bare. Would he still feel fortified when they stood before their canvases, brush in hand, ready to express their truths? The night before their first session, as he lay awake, the weight of the unknown loomed heavy in the quiet darkness. Would they truly be able to unlock a dialogue that had remained shackled? Would he falter once the moment of truth arrived? Or would he rise to meet it boldly, as he desired? The morning light filtered tentatively through the kitchen window, casting soft beams onto the canvas-strewn table. David was already awake, a ripple of anxiety coursing through him like a live wire. Today was the day. They would dip their brushes into a spectrum of colors, but the real task lay in the colors of their emotions. He had played the roles of husband and father for years, but could he also be a bridge between their fractured selves? As he brewed the coffee, the rhythmic sound of dripping water did little to soothe him. His mind replayed the imagined scenes of the evening, the laughter, the inevitable tears, and above all, the confrontations that would reveal the bones of their family's psyche. He inhaled deeply, trying to anchor himself. When Sarah emerged, her hair slightly tousled and eyes still clouded with sleep, he seized the moment. "Are you ready for tonight?" She offered a half-smile, a silent acknowledgement that conveyed both support and trepidation. "I think so," she replied, but he could hear the unspoken "but" hanging in the air. Their initial exchanges remained light, but David's internal monologue roared louder than ever. Why did it feel like he was stepping into uncharted waters, with no map to guide him? The sounds of baking bread and clattering dishes became a subtle reminder that even the most ordinary settings held extraordinary weight. When Lily joined them, fully awake and adorned in an oversized t-shirt that fell past her knees, a flicker of joy lit up the room. "Can we paint now, Daddy?" she chirped, pouring enthusiasm into her words. She was a fresh canvas herself, unblemished by the complexities surrounding her. "Later, sweetheart. First let's eat," he replied, forcing calmness into his voice as his stomach churned with a mix of excitement and dread. As they gathered around the table, the conversation steered toward lighter topics: school, friends, the upcoming weekend. Still, David felt the impending heaviness looming. They were about to peel back layers of emotional armor, strip away the comfort of routine chatter, and dive into something far more significant. "How do you feel about the theme for tonight?" he asked Sarah, knowing fully that the topic pertained not just to their children but also to them. Unmasking love. We could easily lose ourselves in that depth. With a slight sigh, Sarah replied, "It feels overwhelming. Just thinking about it. It feels like we're supposed to know how to love perfectly, and we clearly don't." Her honesty pierced through his resolve. Had they carved out space for vulnerability before? The realization struck him hard. This project was as much about them rediscovering the language of love as it was about teaching Lily. It might help to think about love as a process, he suggested, hoping to ignite a change in her perspective. "It's not about perfection. It's about trying. Perhaps we could paint what we struggle with in loving, too." His heart drummed faster with the possibilities. Sarah paused, allowing her gaze to settle on their daughter, who was diligently tearing into a piece of toast. "That's intriguing." The spark of curiosity blossomed in her eyes, and David sensed a shift. Perhaps this moment could be a tipping point. Maybe they could finally drop their guard, even if just for a moment. As the clock ticked closer to their promised painting time, David's anticipation started morphing into something akin to dread. They were presenting themselves to one another in ways they hadn't done before, and the stakes felt higher than ever. He longed for connection, but feared it would expose chasms between who they were and who they were meant to be. When the clock struck 6, David gathered his breath, feeling the weight of everything they were preparing to confront, and reminded himself, vulnerability was the bridge, not a barricade. "Let's do this," he muttered under his breath, standing in front of the canvases, a battleground awaiting emotional warfare. As they congregated around the table, paintbrushes poised and hearts pounding, he could already see the contours of discomfort beginning to form. Would they each find their strokes of honesty, or would the tension explode into chaos they were not ready to handle? The reminder echoed through his mind, sharper than before. It was the moment of truth. David's hands trembled slightly as he dipped the brush into the thick pool of azure paint. The color felt both familiar and foreign, like the conflicting emotions swirling within him. He watched as the first strokes landed on the canvas, hesitant yet purposeful. This wasn't just an artistic endeavor. It was a manifestation of their internal struggles, their shared experience, their very survival as a family. As Lily began to splatter colors with carefree abandon, David caught glimpses of what he hoped to achieve, a blend of innocence and honesty. He glanced at Sarah, who was staring at her blank canvas, a mix of fear and uncertainty clouding her expression. She held the brush like a foreign object, as if the act of painting both frightened and fascinated her. "Just start with what you feel," David encouraged, his voice steadier than he felt. "Let it flow. You might surprise yourself." She shot him a side glance, a hint of skepticism evident. "What if my feelings come out wrong? What if I can't express them properly?" "That's the point. It's not about making a masterpiece. It's about being real." The reassurance in David's voice belied the anxiety bubbling within. As he spoke, he wondered if he was convincing her or himself. Sarah's laugh had a brittle edge. "What if I end up just painting a mess?" "Then we'll have a beautiful mess together," David replied, forcing a lightness into their shared atmosphere that felt buried under weighty expectations. He wanted to help her see vulnerability, not as a flaw, but as the essence of growth. With a determined sigh, she finally dabbed her brush into a deep maroon. It was a color rich with meaning, a shade often associated with both love and rage. David's heart raced. He realized that perhaps tonight wasn't just a struggle for the family, it was also a battle within himself. He set to work, allowing his brush to glide across the canvas, moving intuitively, almost as if guided by something deep within. Each stroke pulled memories to the surface, moments of joy tinged with sorrow, laughter that echoed through their home, but often dripped with unspoken fears. As the figures began to take shape, David became aware of the fleeting silence around him. He turned to find Lily intently focused, her canvas bursting with bright colors, while Sarah had lost herself in the act of creation, her brow furrowed in concentration. The visual privacy of their individual spaces spoke volumes. They were all struggling against their own demons, and yet each stroke brought them closer together. Minutes passed, and suddenly Sarah exhaled sharply. I don't know if I can do this. It's too much," she admitted, her voice breaking. "Why does it feel like too much?" David asked gently, sensing the tender vulnerability lurking beneath her words. "The fear of not being enough. No one wants to see the real me, especially not my own family," Sarah confessed, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. David's breath caught in his throat. Her words struck with painful clarity, exposing a raw wound he hadn't realized lay beneath the surface. "You are enough," he replied almost instinctively. "Let's be honest with each other. We're all scared of rejection, but facing it might just help us to connect." "I don't know how," she said, her voice trembling with the weight of her confession. "You start by admitting that fear," he suggested, his pulse quickening at the thought of taking this shared experience beyond the canvases and into their hearts. "Let's paint that fear. Let's make it visible." With a hesitant nod, Sarah picked up her brush once more. As the tension dissipated, replaced by a shared effort to confront their limitations, David felt a flicker of hope igniting within him. But as they pressed on, a deeper realization dawned. Authenticity would demand more from them than simply painting their fears. It would require confronting the pain they had long kept hidden. Would they summon the courage to peel away those layers tonight? Or would fear prevail, drawing them back into their hesitant shells? The thick air held thick unspoken words, each one a weight pressing down on them. It became evident that they stood on the precipice of something profound, a pivotal moment that could either heal or fracture their family even further. In that charged silence, David felt the stakes ballooning higher than he ever anticipated. Though they were armed with paintbrushes, their greatest weapon was yet to be drawn: vulnerability, a costly yet indispensable tool for love. "Together," David finally said, breaking the stillness. "Let's do this together." The room buzzed with an electric potential, yet unease still lingered, whispering a promise of conflict to come. How far would they really go? In that moment, the realization settled uncomfortably on his chest. He knew they were not just painting. They were preparing for a confrontation far beyond the canvas. As the evening unfurled, a whirlwind of paint and emotion surrounded David, Sarah, and Lily. The atmosphere buzzed with the combined energy of creation and raw vulnerability, yet it felt perilously balanced on the edge of chaos. Each brushstroke became a political maneuver, threading through fears and insecurities where shadows had long taken root. David watched, his heart swelling and tightening in rhythm with the tangible release of emotions. Lily poured her heart into her canvas, each vivid splash of color a declaration of resilience against the mundane darkness she sometimes felt. It was the embodiment of growth, an assertion of her voice in a world that often silenced the innocent. Sarah, too, had relinquished some of her trepidation. The maroon she initially chose became interlaced with vibrant greens and soft blues, all mixed with a tumultuous palette of feelings that David recognized. Beneath her hesitance lay a canvas resembling the complexity of their shared journey, a life's worth of love interspersed with struggles and setbacks. "Can you see it?" David pointed to the chaos of colors on Sarah's canvas, a metaphor for their lives. "This is the beautiful mess we created as a family." Sarah paused, taken aback by the moment of clarity. "It is a mess, but it's ours." A flicker of acceptance crossed her features. That concession sent warmth spiraling through David, a recognition that even amidst obstacles, they could create something uniquely theirs, both flawed and beautiful. With every color added, every brush stroke, they spoke about the fears and truths they had buried for too long. The project unfolded into more than just an art exercise. It had morphed into a powerful crucible, melting old resentments while forging a new foundation of understanding. The vulnerability they summoned had opened pathways that once felt impassable. "Lily, what are you feeling?" David asked, curious to know how this experience resonated with her. "I feel seen, Dad," she admitted, her voice quivering with sincerity. "I can say things now without being scared." Her smile blossomed, illuminating the remnants of doubt that lingered in their family. Tears pooled in Sarah's eyes, a cascade of relief washing over her. "You're brave for sharing that," she whispered, her voice carrying untold gratitude. It's a step toward making sure you never feel that way again. And that acknowledgement was all David needed. He felt fortified alongside them, the mother and daughter who had anchored him through storms he often thought insurmountable. Their victory wasn't about perfection, but in navigating imperfection hand in hand. As they prepared for the final touches, David savored the exhilarating blend of recognition and achievement pulsing through him. They had unearthed layers of warmth amongst chaos. The once fractured facets of their family had begun to mend. Their pasts, echoing with mistakes, now stood juxtaposed with this moment of manifestation, a promise of a better future. In that critical moment, Rebecca, the art teacher, peeked through the doorway, her eyes lighting up at the vibrant display of emotion before her. "This is phenomenal," she exclaimed, making her way inside with an air of curiosity. "I can feel the energy radiating from your canvases. You really tapped into something special." The external validation wrapped around them like a warm embrace, an affirmation of their collective growth. David's heart swelled with pride, not merely because they created art, but due to the emotional mastery they had transmuted onto those canvases. It transcended simple expression. It was a reflection of their bond. As evening fell, David turned his attention to the reflection of each person inked on the canvas, each innocent sprinkle of color, every deep stroke representing the journey they walked together. This new dynamic emerged, pulsating with promise, and the previously imagined distance began to dwindle into shared laughter and understanding. "I think we've created a masterpiece," he said, glancing at the 3 canvases, their stories woven through each distinct piece. This was more than art. This was a testament to what they could achieve together amidst the darkness. "Let's promise to always make time for this," Sarah said, her voice earnest, weaving hope amongst the strands of vulnerability. "To express our feelings, for Lily and for us." "Agreed," David responded, steady conviction filling his heart. This moment could not dissolve into silence again. They were already fortified by their raw creation. They must carry it outside those walls, into their everyday life. And in that moment, he felt transformed, confident and grounded, ready to confront any shadows ahead. He knew their path would not always be illuminated, that fresh challenges would rise on the horizon. Yet as a cohesive unit, they had unearthed the tools necessary to navigate through them. In a small yet significant way, a paradigm had shifted. David felt an instinctual certainty flourishing within him, a feeling that today had marked the true beginning of their journey toward healing. They had bridged the chasm that once divided them, and now, armed with the lessons painted through emotional labor, they could face whatever came next. Their hearts swelled with unspoken love, and through creative expression, they found solace and unity. It was more than a promise. It was a commitment to no longer just survive together, but flourish. Standing before their colorful creations, David whispered silently into the universe, "We've conquered what divides us. Here's to new beginnings, together." And with that, the echoes of their shared pledge transcended beyond the room, crafting a song of resilience echoing through their home. A home now imbued with vibrancy, hope, and an undeniable sense of belonging. As the night deepened, David felt palpable change in himself, the contours of who he was evolving, confronting fears through the work they had shared. His heart, now a reflection of the colors around him, knew one thing for certain. They were finally ready to step into the world together. At that moment, he achieved not just growth, but renewal, a fortifying transformation that filled him with a sense of purpose larger than himself. As they embraced the night, hope danced in the air, each vulnerable exchange painted vividly upon the canvas of their lives. Now was the time to create, time to forge deeper connections, time to rise together. This journey isn't over, it's just begun, embracing an artful life where they could create more than just colors, but a profound legacy of love to hand down to generations. And as they began to clean their brushes in the soft glow of the kitchen light, David heard a whisper in the core of his being. This was only the beginning of something extraordinary. Subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm. You need to support our journey. Comment your reactions and theories about this transformative ending. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. Don't wait even one more second to share. This is the moment to show your support.